Now, what I'd like to do is just to kind of, I'd like to lay out this might be the wrong point to do this, but I'd like to lay out the big picture, a little picture of the big picture. This is the grid of political philosophy, or of the history of philosophy, that I think could be helpful for understanding where philosophers fit and how the whole thing kind of works. And it'll help you understand, I think, better Aquinas in relation to the other philosophers. So, as a professor, it took me 3 years to be able to write on the board the vertical and the horizontal properly. So this is one of the advantages of having an advanced professor who has these simple things, who has mastered these simple things. But the vertical obviously is up and down. Horizontal is across.
It's like the horizon.
Yeah, horizon. You got that? Horizon, vertical, vertige. See, we're doing some learning. We're learning in here. Now, in the vertical, of course it'll be on the quiz. In the vertical, we can speak of the order of being. Right, the order of being, starting with rocks, and then scissors, and then paper. I mean, no, rocks, plants, animals.
Don't take those rocks for granted.
Human, angels, and God. Humans occupy the most interesting position from our standpoint on the order of being, because they are both material and immaterial at the same time. Body and soul. The wise man, or the philosopher, he rises from knowledge of the material to knowledge of God. He doesn't do this. There's two ways that you can go about this. You can go about this by philosophy, by becoming a wise man and learning the order of reality right now. Or you can go by it. You can come about this by experience. Experience means over time. Right? Over time, you might be able to say, okay, I understand plants, animals, human. Or or it could be like this. I don't know. When I was I went to Ecuador last year with some students over Christmas break, and we did a service project in Cojimias, Ecuador. 70-degree weather every day. The water is 75. It's a very poor village, though. So we worked every day. We built a water tower, dug a well, community center. And the last thing we did is we went and visited the poor people in the village. Now, you might say, well, the whole village was poor. But we visited the people that the people in the village thought were poor people. And we went and saw this one guy, Alicio. And Alicio said to us, we said, Alicio, do you have any advice for us? And he said, yes. God teaches us all, little by little, how to love him. He was like 85 years old or something. And what do you mean, Alicio? He said, well, ever since I was a young man, I would dance with girls, I would drink, party all the time, go crazy, and I did that until I was 70. Now, the thing is, in these villages, you can do it because it's nice weather. I mean, there's a joke that they say in the village where a businessman comes and says to the poor guy, look, why don't you go and make a lot of money and buy a house and, become a billionaire, and then you can come back and build a house on the beach here. And the guy says, why would I want to do all that when I already have the beach right here for myself? I can just stay here the whole time and enjoy the beach, and you can go do the work. So Alicio made a good point, right? He said, well, then when I was 70, he crashed. He said, I finally crashed. And then I promised God, right, that I would start to learn how to serve him. And ever since then, I've been trying to learn how to serve him. So he was baptized when he was like 76 or something like that. But his little point there was interesting. And I think the point of it, as far as there's an old saying, which I think is true, right? You either learn what the truth is now and start to conform yourself to it, or you will learn on the hard road of experience. Right? You will either learn the truth now and conform yourself to it, or you will learn by the hard road of experience. The hard road of experience is tough because you're always blind to what's leading you to the next thing. And that's what Eliseo was basically saying, right? I could have learned how to love God when I was young, but instead I chose the hard road of experience. And these are the two ways that the wise man can approach God. We can come to approach God by using the wisdom that's available to us to understand the order of being and to rise on the order of being to knowledge of God. And that's what Aquinas is going to set out to do in the beginning of the Summa Contra Gentiles. I mean the Gentiles. And he'll also, and we're not going to read it, but the treatise on happiness and also the third book of the Summa Contra Gentiles, he does this way. He starts from experience, leading us up to knowledge, eventually to knowledge of God. The way to understand Descartes and Nietzsche is it, right? Descartes basically says the philosopher or the wise man stands outside of reality. He's like the scientist of reality. And from outside of reality, he tries to figure out what the material world is and what the spiritual world is and how they unite to each other. Yes?
Would the same path to knowledge of God apply to like Jesus, or is that
Who? To who?
Jesus?
Oh, yeah. The whole Old Testament is an education getting the Israelites ready for their Messiah. And doing it little by little. Failing, succeeding, because they're a stiff-necked people.
Well, did the Messiah himself know of his knowledge about that? I mean,
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, that's a question Aquinas goes into in the third. That's a question he addresses in the first 20 questions of the third book of the Summa Theologica. And I one time read that with a student, and at the end, the student was threatened to either stop reading it with me or leave the university. So that was one of my first moments of glory.
Oh, the administration did?
No, it's an old story. Back in the 20th century. Those things don't happen anymore. That was in the bad old days, back in the 20th century.
Because the 21st century is so much different.
Oh yeah, no, this is the good times. Now we're in good times. It's not the bad old days anymore. So, but that question he addresses that question, and that's a mystery. It's hard to know. I mean, it's a mystery in the sense that we can know it, but it's a theological mystery. It's beyond the scope of this course. Because how does Christ's human nature know? Christ is both human and divine at the same time. So how does the human nature learn? What Socrates argues, just to kind of distinguish here, well, just really quick, Descartes has trouble understanding how the spiritual and material end up relating to each other. What Nietzsche will do is Nietzsche will deny that there's any spiritual, right? And so by their own admission, I would say by Nietzsche's own admission, his knowledge is limited to material aspects of reality. He'll always end up treating humans in such a way that they will act like animals. By Descartes' own admission, he doesn't know how the moral life works. For Socrates, for Plato, I think this is true too. If you want to become a philosopher, if you want to just live a good life, you have to start to know the truth. The truth is the first requirement of the common good. What is the common good? The common good is that which makes the individual flourish, as well as the groups in society and the community as a whole. The first requirement of the common good is truth.
We get common good one more time.
The common good is, I gotta pause. The common good is that which enables the individuals and groups and the society as a whole, W-H-O-L-E, to flourish. The first requirement, this is Socrates now, this is not Aquinas, but Aquinas agrees with it. The first requirement of the common good is truth. What is the virtue that gets you to the truth about yourself? Sincerity. What is sincerity? Sincerity is a form of integrity, and on the quiz you can't just say sincerity is integrity. You got to say more than that. But sincerity is a form of integrity. Sincerity is when the words, let's say the thoughts, the words, and the deeds of the person are consistent with what is true and what is good. Sincerity is when the thoughts, the words, and the deeds of the person are habitually consistent, because it's a habit, right? Consistent with what is true and what is good. In order for your body, for you to flourish, you have to be willing to admit the truth about what you are and what your circumstances are. The brutal truth. There are 28 people in this room right now. Statistically speaking, 4 of us are alcoholics. Me and 3 of you. So I'll make it easy on you. There's 5 girls, that's right. We have a math major here.
For all of us.
So, it really behooves you. It really behooves, just like there might be 5 of us also who are diabetics, right? There are 2 kinds of alcoholics. Just like there are 2 kinds of diabetics, there are diabetics that are born with something in them, and that somehow at some point in their life the disease will manifest itself. There are other people who have such bad diets that they become diabetics. Well, alcoholism is just like diabetes. There are some people that are born with the disposition. There's nothing you can do about it. If you have it, I'm sorry. But face it now, right? One telltale sign of an alcoholic is that when they drink, they black out. Not pass out, but black out. Blackout means your eyes go black, but you continue to function. And then you don't know what you do. There are alcoholics that commit murder while blacked out, and they never realize it. So most people that drink and drive and get DUIs, they're alcoholics because they don't realize that they're even driving. I have a sister who's an alcoholic. She blacked out one night and woke up in jail the next day. Doesn't even know what she did.
That's scary.
Yeah, well, but that's why. But the other problem with alcoholism is even in the face of the evidence, you'll always rationalize, no, I'm not an alcoholic. All right, that's one of the problems with the disease, because it's partly a psychological disease as much as it's physical. It's not just like getting cancer. It's also psychological and spiritual. But see, the alcoholic who doesn't admit the truth, his appetites or his passions will destroy him or her. Yes.
Can drinking be a good moral action?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with drinking. I mean, so long as it's got to be done, understood in the intent with temperance, right? There's an appropriate measure for drinking, and the point is drunkenness. If you lose whenever you are at a point where you are in danger of losing your reason, then you are in danger of sinning. Because when you lose your reason, your passions take control. Yes.
So isn't there an argument for temperance and drug use? That as long as you don't lose your reason, you can...
I don't know. I don't think so.
I mean,
Because it's
Like taking marijuana.
the object is different between marijuana and alcohol. They're different objects of the action. Because it's different things. I would say marijuana is much more closely related to altering your mind and your reason. Because what marijuana does, it's like the girl, when I was in graduate school, this girl comes up to me and she says, hey, let's go back in the room and smoke a joint. It'll really make you think. But all it does, what marijuana does, is it makes you lose your intellect and your imagination starts to go wild. So your imagination is not your intellect.
Yeah. Well, how about the guys that smoke to just have a good time? Like not necessarily to just sit there and ponder the universe in their own little room. It's just almost sort of like drinking in a party.
Right.
A social situation.
Well, I would say even there that the object is what happens to your mind. The effects of the action are independent of your intentions, right? So if an action is evil, it can be evil independently of your intentions. And so I would say that no matter what your intentions are, that's the effect it has on your mind. You can't control that effect.
So why is there a 21-year-old drinking age?
Because the law, the society makes laws based on the effects of actions. And I know this because my dad's a bar owner in the state of Michigan. He owns 6 bars. My uncle owns a bar. All my cousins own bars. Okay, so I know alcohol. If there's one thing I know, it's alcohol, okay? It's like my cousin Vinny. My uncle was a mechanic. My cousins are mechanics. All my brothers are mechanics. I think I know cars. So, no, the simple law part, one of the big reasons they write laws is because they want to control the bad effects of certain actions. So they know that if the legal drinking age is 18, people will more or less start drinking when they're 15, a certain percentage of the population. They realize there's always going to be people that start drinking when they're 12. You can't stop that. But there's a percentage that will start drinking when they're 15 if the law is 18.
So won't that reduce the glorification of alcohol then? If you start at an earlier age?
I don't know. I mean,
I'm
I mean, we can get into all these debates, but this is why they do it.
Right.
They've statistically figured out that if they have the age at 21, then you'll get this, I don't know what the actual percentages are. They're just looking at percentages that lead to driving, that lead to death. That's all they're looking at. Right? So they're saying this many people will start at 15 if it's 18. If we have it to 21, fewer people will start at 15, and then this many people will start at 18. We're better off having that. It causes less deaths on the highway, less alcoholic problems, less kids, whatever, right?
They do that with smoking then.
They do it with smoking.
Well, 18, not 20, like,
Right, because they figure if it's 18, people will start when they're 16 or something like that. And that's better than 12.
Is it legal?
Doesn't kill other people, though.
Right. Smoking is the gateway to other drugs.
Yeah, but isn't smoking
But it's not as
legal
bad.
if you're like 16 as long as you don't buy it?
Yeah, I don't care. I don't care what the law is. I'm just telling you that's why they do it. Okay? He asked me why they do it. I'm telling you that's why they do it. I'm sorry. So, part of the history of philosophy then, what Socrates ultimately is going to argue is that if you want to start basic relationships with other people, you have to start being sincere with yourself. You have to start examining your conscience and growing in moral virtue. One of the best things you could do to start liberating yourself from the passions which are seeking to enslave you would be not to turn off the radio all the time, but to turn it off once in a while in the car, right? Or to limit the amount of video games you play. In other words, one of the bad things about philosophy right now is I can't force you to do things that would help you grow in virtue. But that's what, if you were to enter Plato's Academy, there were some philosophical schools in Athens that adopted Plato's philosophy. They would work on their students growing in virtue for like 10 years before they let them do the intellectual work. Because why? They say the moral life is a preparation for the intellectual life. They're intimately related. And if you want to establish harmony in the world, you first got to establish the common good within yourself. And the common good within yourself is reason governing the will and the passions. And reason overall directing the person to God. In a dialogue we're not reading, the Alcibiades II, which is a sequel to Alcibiades I, Socrates tries to teach Alcibiades how to pray. Because he says this is the most important thing for starting the life of growing in virtue. This is Socrates. This is not some lunatic fundamentalist Christian. This is Socrates. Right? This is 300 years before Jesus Christ. 400 years before Jesus Christ. Yes?
That caused me to wonder. Like, I understand how Socrates, like, explained the existence of the soul in a higher authority.
Mm-hmm.
But where did he really get all that from? Like, the specific, like, prayer,
Yeah.
for example. Where did he get that from?
It's a mixture. He gets it partly from the religion of Athens, partly from what he sees in other religions, because he knew that the Sicilians to this day have great respect for the dead. When I went to Sicily, I walked down in this cavern, and they have this huge cavern beneath the city where everybody buries everybody. And but you can go visit your ancestors from 5 centuries ago, and they're buried. They're not even buried. They're just sitting like in bunk beds, 16 beds high, and they dress them up in their clothes. And you can go look at 16th century fashion and how bad it is, and compare it to how bad our fashion is. So he got it a lot. I mean, it's a mixture of things. He says, look, everybody has this notion of God, and now is there a way I can prove it using reason? That's kind of how it works. Everybody thinks they're gods. Well, there can't, and then he says, well, using reason, there can't be many gods. There has to be one. And it has to be spiritual, not material gods. So he takes the ideas that are out there, and then he tries to use reason to prove them and to purify the ideas that are out there and the practices that are out there. So once we establish virtue, then we can start to establish basic relationships with others. And those basic relationships can lead eventually to friendships. And those friendships can lead to us understanding the harmony or the order in the universe. And then once we understand the harmony or order in the universe, we can further perfect ourselves. We can make ourselves freer at that point by conforming ourselves to the order that we discover in the universe. By the way, for all you wannabe business majors out there, I recommend that you read the book Good to Great. Because what you will see in that book, I think, is how companies that truly are great companies, that become great, they learn virtue. That people who rule companies like Machiavellians or like utilitarians, and this, I don't think this guy is like Mr. Virtue. I don't even think this guy is a philosopher, but I think he just did the research and he realized that the people that make great companies are not people that rule like Machiavellians or Nietzscheans or even utilitarians. They rule because they love what they do, they love their company, and they want to treat people well so they can serve others. And those companies that become great, like Walgreens, from a financial standpoint, Walgreens is a great company. It makes more money than Walmart. From like 75 until now, it's made more money than Walmart, Microsoft, Intel, Hewlett-Packard, Merck. Pardon?
What about Target?
Makes more money than Target. Target's not a big money maker. It's not a great company.
Yeah, they donate the most of any company.
Another one of these companies that's actually a great company is Philip Morris.
Yes.
From that standpoint, and also an American steel company, Nucor. Pardon? Yeah, well, I'm talking about the years 75 to 2000.
You said on Walgreens.
Kroger actually is the biggest making grocery chain of the last 50 years. Kroger. But it's a publicly held company on Wall Street. Kroger is a grocery store. It's a publicly held company on Wall Street. They're in Texas too.
They're in Alabama.
But anyway, these if you read this book, it's a fascinating book. I encourage you all to read it. Because you'll see that they basically operate on principles of virtue. These companies that become great companies, they operate on principles of virtue. So when I get kicked out of academics, I'm going to go work for Walgreens. Pardon? Sheets? No, they're not. They're not one of these companies. They're not one of these companies. It was mentioned in the book. They weren't mentioned. There was only 11 companies in the last 50 years that were able to go from being mediocre to great companies. Okay, so Nietzsche, by his own admission, does not look at the spiritual world. So his vision is limited. He can't, by his own admission, understand all of reality. So he'll never really get to the point of understanding the harmony that's in the universe so that he can transform himself to make himself capable of being a friend. And that's why the Little Prince, that's the big concern of the Little Prince. In modern world, we lack the capacity for friendship somehow. And he doesn't know why. But somehow all these modern philosophies have sapped us or deprived us of our knowledge of friendship. Yes, Eileen.
Well, isn't it opposite? Because if Nietzsche is like this willpower is like about yourself, not your friendship, like
Right.
That's what friends are based on.
Right. You'll never make yourself the kind of person that can relate to others. In fact, I said something on Saturday which I probably should not repeat here. But now that I've made that introduction, I have to say it. It's like the previous class. After the other class today, I said, I said stuff in this class it should never be said in the classroom. And they said, no, but it was a great class. So, no, but I said, I think this is true. And it could be very easily misunderstood, but I think it is true. That guys who are in college have to learn how to make friends with other guys. And girls have to make friends with other girls. That sounds very simplistic, but one danger I see happening, I mean, it happened when I was growing up too, so I'm not saying that I'm any different, but that you'll find that there are people where the guy, his only friend is a girl, or his only friends that he really talks to are girls, and vice versa. Well, not so much vice versa, but especially for guys, it's a problem.
The girls who do that aren't really talking much.
Pardon?
What?
No, but this is, okay, so jokes aside. No, but jokes aside, because I'm trying to be serious. That when guys don't learn how to make friends with guys, I mean, I'm not saying that we should, separate everybody. But when guys fail to make friends with guys, they fail oftentimes to grow in virtue. Because they fail, when guys make friends with girls, it's always a little bit of a self-interested relationship. And so they need to make friends with other guys, where they have to get beyond the drinking buddies, which is a utilitarian relationship, and become real friends. Otherwise, they don't mature. It's very easy then to be a Nietzschean your whole life. Especially in our society where everybody's just taught, just follow your instincts, do what your desires tell you, trust your feelings. Right? Those are all Nietzschean phrases. So that's a big challenge that our times face, I think. So I'll make sure I erase that before I put that publicly. But I had to go to a seminar on Saturday. I showed up, and I thought it was going to be 50 minutes. And they said, oh, you're here to speak for 3 hours, right? 3 50-minute classes. I said, well, I guess so. So I did. I spoke for 3 hours.
Where?
At Chicago. It's for high school seniors at Northwestern. Seminar for high school seniors. Yes?
Especially like Shidozi, they called you out to come to that?
Yeah, well, they know I'm a professor here. They want a professor to talk to the seniors to let them know what's really going on at universities.
Why didn't they get their own professor?
Why didn't what?
Why didn't they get their own professor?
Well, I'm the only one they knew, and they like what I have to say.
Oh, okay.
Because they knew at some point I would point at them and I would say, you will be emasculated. You will never grow up.
Now you can't say that they never choose you for anything. No.
No, I can't say what?
You can't complain that they never pick you to do anything.
This university.
Oh, well, they didn't give me any money for this. It wasn't this.
So you're only doing this for the money that you're saying.
No, I didn't.
Somebody's sounding
If it's any consolation to you, this is the first time in 5 years I'm going to break the poverty line.
Depressing.
I mean, if you just want to talk about how much money I'm making. And normally when I go to these things, I get humiliated. So, like I was telling the other class, I went to this conference last year. I brought my students. It was second semester, and there was this conference that was relevant to the class at the University of Chicago. So I made some deal, like you could write your paper on it or write all 3 your one-pagers on it or something like that. And I go to this conference, and I was trying to make the other class the point that the people who follow Aristotle, Augustine, Plato, Aquinas, they're in the minority. We're in a kind of minority. And I'm at this conference. I used to try to tell the story anonymously, like not talking about me, but just because I thought it was a good story. But then students would always figure out that it was me. So I'm not even going to try to hide the fact, right? But so this guy's giving a lecture at the University of Chicago. There's 400 people in the auditorium. And he says, basically, anybody out there that's a Thomist and a Catholic, you should realize that you are now in the minority. You now have a culture and an intellectual life and a military and economic culture which is superior to your own. And it's just about time that you face it. Right? This was his philosophical discourse. So I'm thinking about, I'm sitting there, I'm really thinking about this. And I'm saying to myself, that's just like Rome. That's just like Rome, right? The Christians were nobodies. They had no economic power, no military power. They had no influence on the laws. If a Christian got into the academic world and it was found out he was a Christian, he'd get kicked out. Teenage girls were refusing to get married and getting their heads chopped off or burned in ovens and things like this. Spun on the wheel of fortune. And so I said, well, that's what he's telling me. He's telling me that I'm like a Christian in Rome. So then the thought came to my mind that, well, I wonder what might be the things that we would get martyred for, right? If we said no. So question and answer session comes. Anybody have any questions? I raise my hand, right? And then they don't even look at me. First of all, they don't even look at me. And they look all over the crowd like this and like this. And then finally, you over there, lunatic, loser. I had a colleague once tell me, we were at lunch, I don't even know what I was telling him. And he just burst out at some point. That's because you're a loser. You're a loser and you don't belong here and you should leave. So I said, does that mean you're paying? Does that mean you're paying for lunch?
I love how you pride yourself over these kind of stories.
Well, now I do, because now I think it's funny. I mean, you know what? What else can you do but laugh at them? I mean, it's true. The first or second time these things happen, I would lose sleep a little bit and worry about them. But now I just like, well, okay, yeah. I mean,
Wait, so
So anyway, so I raised my hand. So I said, it seems to me what you were saying, just so that I got it right, that you were saying that we now are in a culture that is superior to ours, and that we should admit that. Is that right? Yes. Good. So during the Roman Empire, the same thing seemed to happen with respect to the Catholics, right? They were in the minority. They were kicked out of the academic life. They weren't allowed in. Economic, oppression, all this stuff. And yet they were willing to say no. There were certain things they were not willing to do, right? They were not willing to kiss the you-know-what of the emperor. They weren't willing to bow down and worship him. They weren't willing to live unchastity. They lived chastity. You couldn't get them to not live chastity. So, given that this culture is superior to us, what are things that you might expect in this culture that we would have to say no to? I'm not going to answer that question. That's a bad question. And I said, well, don't you think there might be some lines we're going to have to draw? I mean, even if it's like, economic ones or social ones, we don't have to get to the serious ones. That's the problem with me, points at me. That's the problem with people like you. You want to make distinctions. You want to draw lines. This isn't a question anybody can answer. We can never know when a person is going to be a martyr. What a martyr is and who will be a martyr, that's mysterious. It's not something we can predict. And then what was even funnier is that because this never happens at conferences, right? The guy who has power over me, who I will not name, he stands up to ask the next question. And he just says, well, before I ask my question, I just want to say, that was a beautiful response you gave to the previous questioner. Kind of like, too bad they let that schmuck in here. But you showed him.
And this guy's your boss?
Well, no, he's not necessarily my boss. But he could cause trouble for me. But anyway. But then what's funny though, well, I was kind of, at that was a stage of my life where I was now laughing at these things. And but everybody came up to me afterwards, they said, gosh, I thought that was a pretty good question. I kind of wish you would have answered it. I mean, just to think a little bit about the situation and whatnot. So I was somewhat vindicated by the people in the audience that came up to console me and to heal my wounds, to help me lick my wounds after yet another defeat. Another defeat at the. I should have stood up and said, "That's a sophist. That's exactly what a sophist would do."